A young baseball player lies in a hospital bed, his face shattered by a baseball bat that slipped from a teammate's hands during practice. The metal bat had struck him square in the face, breaking his nose in two places, cracking his skull, and causing serious brain trauma. James Clear couldn't even speak properly for months. His dreams of playing college baseball seemed over before they'd really begun. That moment of devastation would become the foundation for one of the most powerful systems of personal transformation ever developed. Because what James discovered in his slow, methodical recovery wasn't just how to rebuild his life. It was how to rebuild anyone's life, one tiny habit at a time. If you've ever tried to change something about yourself and failed, if you've ever started strong with a new goal only to find yourself back where you started weeks later, if you've ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly maintain good habits while you struggle with the basics, what you're about to discover will change everything. This isn't just another self-help story. This is about the hidden architecture of human behavior, the invisible forces that shape every single thing you do, and more importantly, how to harness those forces to become the person you've always wanted to be. James Clear didn't just recover from his accident. He went on to play college baseball, graduated with academic honors, and built a business that reaches millions of people. But here's what's remarkable. He did it all by focusing on getting just 1% better each day. Not through massive overhauls or dramatic transformations, but through tiny, almost invisible improvements that compound over time. Most people think change requires big, dramatic actions. We believe we need to completely reinvent ourselves, throw out everything we're doing wrong, and start fresh with an entirely new lifestyle. We think we need more motivation, more willpower, more discipline. But what James discovered through his recovery, and later proved through years of research, shows something completely different. The most powerful changes don't come from dramatic moments of inspiration. They come from systems of small habits that build momentum over time. They come from understanding that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. When you understand this, everything shifts. Success isn't about the goals you set, it's about the systems you build. It's not about the person you want to become, it's about the small actions you're willing to repeat day after day. And most importantly, it's not about perfection, it's about progression. But here's what's really happening underneath all of this. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Every habit is casting a ballot for your future self. The question isn't whether you'll change, you're changing every day through your actions. The question is whether you're changing in the direction you want to go. This is why most people struggle with lasting change. They focus on what they want to achieve instead of who they want to become. They try to change outcomes instead of changing their identity. But identity change is the North Star of lasting transformation. And that leads us to something even more powerful than James Clear's personal story of recovery. It leads us to a complete system for understanding how habits really work, why they stick, and how you can design a life where good habits are automatic and bad habits become impossible to maintain. Chapter 1: The Surprising Truth About 1% Better. Here's a story that will completely change how you think about improvement. The British cycling team was, for decades, utterly mediocre. In over 100 years of competition, they had won just a single Olympic gold medal. Their performance was so poor that top bicycle manufacturers wouldn't even let them use their bikes, afraid it would hurt their brand. Then in 2003, they hired Dave Brailsford as their new performance director. Brailsford had a philosophy he called the aggregation of marginal gains. His approach was simple: find tiny improvements in everything the team did and add them together for remarkable results. The improvements were almost laughably small. They redesigned the bike seats to make them more comfortable. They rubbed alcohol on the tires for better grip. They asked riders to wear electrically heated overshorts to maintain ideal muscle temperature. They used biofeedback sensors to monitor how each athlete responded to different workouts. They tested different massage gels to see which one led to the fastest muscle recovery. They even painted the inside of the team truck white to help them spot any dust that might degrade bike performance. None of these improvements was groundbreaking on its own. But when you added them all together, something magical happened. Just 5 years later, the British cycling team dominated the Olympics, winning 60% of the gold medals available. 4 years after that, they repeated their success. Between 2007 and 2017, British cyclists won 178 world championships and 66 Olympic or Paralympic gold medals. This is where everything clicked for James Clear. He realized that breakthrough moments are often the result of many previous actions, which build up the potential required to unleash a major change. We think we need to change our results, but the results are not the problem. What we really need to change are the systems that cause those results. Most people think that if they want different results, they need to set bigger goals or find more motivation. But goals are just the results you want to achieve. Systems are the processes that lead to those results. If you want better results, forget about setting goals. Focus on your system instead. When you understand this, everything shifts. You realize that every outcome in your life is a lagging measure of your habits. Your weight is a lagging measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a lagging measure of your learning habits. Your net worth is a lagging measure of your financial habits. You get what you repeat. But here's what's really happening underneath. Small changes often appear to make no difference until you cross a critical threshold. You expect to make progress in a linear fashion, but the results of your habits compound over time. In the early and middle stages of any quest, there's often a valley of disappointment where you feel like you're not making progress even though you're working hard. This explains why so many people give up on their habits. They make a few small changes, expect to see immediate results, and when they don't see dramatic improvements, they conclude that small changes don't work. But they do work, they're just delayed. Imagine you have an ice cube sitting on the table in front of you. The room is cold below freezing. You start heating the room, 26 degrees, 27, 28. The ice cube is still solid, 29 degrees, 30, 31, still nothing. Then 32 degrees, the ice begins to melt. A 1-degree shift, seemingly no different from the temperature increases before it, has unlocked a huge change. Breakthrough moments are often the result of many previous actions, which build up the potential required to unleash a major change. Bamboo can barely be seen for the first 5 years, as it builds extensive root systems underground before exploding 90 feet into the air within 6 weeks. This is the power of atomic habits. Just as atoms are the building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are the building blocks of remarkable results. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Getting 1% better every day counts for a lot in the long run. Here's the math that will change your life. If you can get just 1% better each day for 1 year, you'll end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Conversely, if you get 1% worse each day for 1 year, you'll decline nearly down to 0. Small changes can make a meaningful difference. But success is not a goal to reach or a finish line to cross. It is a system to improve, an endless process to refine. The goal is not to run a marathon, the goal is to become a runner. The real reason habits matter is not because they can get you better results, though they can do that, but because they can change your beliefs about yourself. And that leads us to something even more powerful than the mathematics of improvement. It leads us to understanding that the most effective way to change your habits is to focus not on what you want to achieve, but on who you wish to become. Your identity emerges out of your habits. Every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. Chapter 2. The Identity-Based Revolution. There's a story James tells about 2 people who are trying to quit smoking. When offered a cigarette, the first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." The second person declines by saying, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." That small difference in language reveals a profound difference in identity. The first person still sees themselves as a smoker who is trying to become something else. The second person has already shifted their identity and sees themselves as a non-smoker. This is where James discovered something that completely changed his understanding of habit formation. Most people try to change their habits by focusing on what they want to achieve. But the most effective way to change your habits is to focus on who you want to become. Your identity emerges out of your habits. You are not born with preset beliefs. Every belief, including those about yourself, is learned and conditioned through experience. More precisely, your habits are how you embody your identity. When you make your bed each day, you embody the identity of an organized person. When you write each day, you embody the identity of a creative person. When you train each day, you embody the identity of an athletic person. The more you repeat a behavior, the more you reinforce the identity associated with that behavior. In fact, the word identity was originally derived from the Latin word's meaning, repeated beingness. Your identity is literally your repeated beingness. This creates a fascinating feedback loop. Your habits shape your identity, and your identity shapes your habits. It's a two-way street. The formation of all habits is a feedback loop, but it's important to let your identity drive your habits, not the other way around. Here's how this works in practice. Imagine two people resisting a cigarette. When offered a smoke, the first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." It sounds like a reasonable response, but this person still believes they are a smoker who is trying to be something else. They are hoping their behavior will change while carrying around the same beliefs. The second person declines by saying, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." It's a small difference, but this statement signals a shift in identity. Smoking was part of their former life, not their current one. They no longer identify as someone who smokes. Most people don't even consider identity change when they set out to improve. They just think, "I want to be skinny and set out to lose weight," or "I want to be strong and expect to get muscled up." These are outcome-based habits. The alternative is to build identity-based habits. With this approach, we start by focusing on who we wish to become. The goal is not to read a book. The goal is to become a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. The goal is not to learn an instrument. The goal is to become a musician. Your behaviors are usually a reflection of your identity. What you do is an indication of the type of person you believe that you are. When you have repeated a story to yourself for years, it is easy to slide into these mental grooves and accept them as a fact. In time, you begin to resist certain actions because that's not who I am. There is internal pressure to maintain your self-image and behave in a way that is consistent with your beliefs. You find whatever way you can to avoid contradicting yourself. But here's what's really happening underneath. Your identity is not set in stone. You have the power to change your beliefs about yourself. Your identity is created by your habits. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. No single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. This is why meaningful change does not require radical change. Small habits can make a meaningful difference by providing evidence of a new identity. And if a change is meaningful, it is actually as big. That's the paradox of making small improvements. The process of building habits is actually the process of becoming yourself. Each time you choose to perform a bad habit, it's a vote for that identity. Each time you choose to perform a good habit, it's a vote for that identity. The question is, what kind of person do the votes cast by your habits suggest that you are? The more evidence you have for a belief, the more strongly you will believe it. For most of my early life, I didn't consider myself a writer. If you read my writing from high school, the evidence was clear. I was not a writer. When I began my writing career, the evidence was clear. I was not a writer. I had 0 articles published. But as I began to write more, the evidence slowly changed. I had a few articles published, then a few dozen articles, then a book. As the evidence grew, so did my identity as a writer. I didn't start out as a writer. I became one through my habits. Of course, your identity can work against you too. Maybe you've told yourself, "I'm not a morning person," so many times that you've convinced yourself it's true. Or perhaps you've repeated, "I'm bad with technology," or "I'm not good with money," so often that you've accepted these beliefs as facts rather than opinions. The more deeply a thought or pattern of behavior is tied to your identity, the more difficult it is to change it. It can feel comfortable to believe what your culture believes or to do what those around you are doing. But the most effective way to change your habits is to focus on who you want to become, not what you want to achieve. And that leads us to something even more practical than identity change. It leads us to understanding exactly how habits work at the neurological level and how you can use this knowledge to make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. Chapter 3: The 4 Laws That Rule All Behavior. In the 1990s, a group of researchers at MIT began studying the neurological patterns of habit formation. They implanted electrodes in the brains of rats and put them in a T-shaped maze with chocolate placed at one end. The rats would sniff around, scratch at walls, and explore. When they found the chocolate, their brain activity spiked with pleasure. The researchers repeated this experiment hundreds of times. Over time, something remarkable happened. As each rat learned the route, its mental activity decreased. The rat stopped sniffing corners and making false turns. Instead, it raced down the path faster and faster. And within its brain, something unexpected occurred. The rat's brain activity decreased even though it was successfully navigating the maze. This is where James discovered something profound about how habits work. The researchers had discovered the neurological basis of habit formation. When a habit emerges, the brain stops fully participating in decision-making. It stops working so hard or diverts focus to other tasks. So unless you deliberately fight a habit, unless you find new cues, the pattern will unfold automatically. This is both the curse and blessing of habits. It's a curse because once formed, bad habits seem to persist forever. But it's a blessing because once good habits are established, we can execute them without thinking. Mental energy is finite, so we need habits to preserve it for more important decisions. The MIT researchers discovered that all habits follow the same neurological pattern, which James calls the habit loop. This loop consists of 4 stages: cue, craving, response, and reward. The cue triggers your brain to initiate a behavior. The craving is the motivational force behind every habit. The response is the actual habit you perform, and the reward is the end goal of every habit. Without the first 3 steps, a behavior will not occur. Without all 4, a behavior will not be repeated. The cue triggers a craving, which motivates a response, which provides a reward, which satisfies the craving, and ultimately becomes associated with the cue. Together, these 4 steps form a neurological feedback loop that enables you to create automatic habits. This 4-step pattern is the backbone of every habit, and your brain runs through these steps in the same order each time. First, there is the cue. Your phone buzzes with a new text message. Second, there is the craving. You want to learn the contents of the message. Third, there is the response. You grab your phone and read the text. Fourth, there is the reward. You satisfy your craving to read the message. Grabbing your phone becomes associated with your phone buzzing. But here's what's really happening underneath. The cue is about noticing the reward. The craving is about wanting the reward. The response is about obtaining the reward. We chase rewards because they serve 2 purposes. They satisfy us and they teach us. The first purpose of rewards is to satisfy your craving. Yes, rewards provide benefits on their own. Food and water deliver the energy you need to survive. Getting promoted brings more money and respect. Getting in shape improves your health and your dating prospects. But the more immediate benefit is that rewards satisfy your craving to eat or to gain status or to win approval. The second purpose of rewards is to teach us which actions are worth remembering in the future. Your brain is a reward detector. As you go about your life, your sensory nervous system is continuously monitoring which actions satisfy your desires and deliver pleasure. Feelings of pleasure and disappointment are part of the feedback mechanism that helps your brain distinguish useful actions from useless ones. This is why understanding the 4-step habit loop is so powerful. It gives you the framework for designing good habits and eliminating bad ones. James discovered that you can transform any habit by applying 4 simple rules, which he calls the 4 laws of behavior change. For building good habits, make it obvious, cue, make it attractive, craving, make it easy, response, and make it satisfying, reward. For breaking bad habits, you simply invert these laws, make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, and make it unsatisfying. Let's say you want to build the habit of reading more books. Following the 4 laws, you might place a book on your pillow each morning, make it obvious. Join a book club where you can discuss what you've read, make it attractive. Start by committing to read just 1 page each night, make it easy. And track your reading habit on a calendar, make it satisfying. Or let's say you want to break the habit of checking your phone too often. You might leave your phone in another room, make it invisible. Turn off notifications for social media apps, make it unattractive. Log out of social media apps after each use, make it difficult. And ask a friend to check on your progress, make it unsatisfying when you fail. The key insight is that every habit can be broken down into these 4 components. And by manipulating these components, you can design your environment and your routines to make good habits easier and bad habits harder. Most people think they lack motivation when what they really lack is clarity. It is not always obvious when and where to take action. Some people spend their entire lives waiting for the time to be right to make an improvement. The first law of behavior change is to make it obvious. The 2 most common cues are time and location. Implementation intentions, which are plans you make beforehand about when and where to act, are particularly useful for sticking to a new habit. The format is, I will behavior at time and location. For example, I will meditate for 1 minute at 7 a.m. in my kitchen. But there's something even more powerful than implementation intentions, and that's what James calls habit stacking. The habit stacking formula is, After current habit, I will new habit. For example, after I pour my cup of coffee each morning, I will meditate for 1 minute. Or, after I take off my work shoes, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. And that leads us to something even more fundamental than the mechanics of habit formation. It leads us to understanding how your environment shapes your behavior in ways you've never realized, and how you can design your surroundings to make good habits inevitable. Chapter 4: Environment is the Invisible Hand. In 1968, two Stanford researchers conducted one of the most famous experiments in psychology. They left a car without license plates parked with its hood up on a street in the Bronx, and another identical car in the same condition in Palo Alto, California. The car in the Bronx was attacked by vandals within 10 minutes of its abandonment. The first to arrive were a family, father, mother, and young son, who removed the radiator and battery. Within 24 hours, virtually everything of value had been removed. Then random destruction began. Windows were smashed, parts torn off, upholstery ripped. Children began using the car as a playground. Most of the adult vandals were well-dressed, apparently clean-cut whites. The car in Palo Alto sat untouched for more than a week. Then the researchers themselves went up and began smashing it with a sledgehammer. Soon passers-by were taking turns. Within a few hours, the car had been turned upside down and utterly destroyed. Again, the vandals appeared to be primarily respectable whites. This experiment revealed a profound truth about human behavior. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. We think our habits are driven by our goals and intentions, but the truth is that context often matters more than motivation. This is where James discovered something that revolutionized his understanding of habit formation. Every habit is initiated by a cue, and we are more likely to notice cues that stand out. Making a better decision is easy and natural when the cues for good habits are obvious and the cues for bad habits are invisible. Environment design allows you to take back control and become the architect of your life. Be the designer of your world and not merely the consumer of it. You don't have to be the victim of your environment. You can also be the architect of it. Here's how this works in practice. If you want to eat healthier, don't rely on willpower to resist the cookies in your pantry. Instead, don't buy the cookies in the first place. If you want to watch less television, don't leave the remote control sitting on the coffee table. If you want to practice guitar more frequently, place your guitar stand in the middle of the living room. The most disciplined people are structured so they don't have to call on their discipline very often. They spend less time in tempting situations. It's easier to avoid temptation than resist it. Remove a single cue and the entire habit often fades away. This principle works in reverse too. If you want to break a bad habit, one of the most effective things you can do is reduce your exposure to the cue that causes it. If you can't seem to get any work done, leave your phone in another room for a few hours. If you're continually feeling like you're not enough, stop following social media accounts that trigger jealousy and envy. If you're wasting too much time watching television, move the TV out of the bedroom. It is easier to build new habits in a new environment because you are not fighting against old cues. When you step outside your normal environment, you leave your behavioral biases behind. You aren't battling old environmental cues, which allows new habits to form without interruption. But here's what's really happening underneath. Your habits change depending on the room you are in and the cues in front of you. Environment is the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Despite our unique personalities, certain behaviors tend to arise again and again under certain environmental conditions. The people with the best self-control are typically the ones who need to use it the least. It's easier to practice self-restraint when you don't have to use it very often. So, yes, perseverance, grit, and willpower are essential to success. But the way to improve these qualities is not by wishing you were a more disciplined person, but by creating a more disciplined environment. If you want to make a habit a big part of your life, make the cue a big part of your environment. The most persistent behaviors usually have multiple cues. Consider how many different ways a smoker could be prompted to pull out a cigarette. Driving in the car, seeing a friend smoke, feeling stressed at work, and so on. The same strategy can be employed for good habits. By sprinkling triggers throughout your surroundings, you increase the odds that you'll think about your habit throughout the day. Make sure the best choice is the most obvious one. Making a better decision is easy and natural when the cues for good habits are right in front of you. For habits you want to avoid, you can apply this research in the opposite direction. Rather than making it obvious, you can make it invisible. I've never seen someone consistently stick to positive habits in a negative environment. A stable environment where everything has a place and a purpose is an environment where habits can easily form. Be the designer of your world and not merely the consumer of it. Each habit should have a home. And that leads us to something even more counterintuitive than environment design. It leads us to understanding why motivation is overrated and how you can make good habits so easy that you'll do them even when you don't feel like it. Chapter 5, The Power of Laziness. Here's a story that will change how you think about building habits forever. When James Clear decided he wanted to start working out consistently, he didn't begin by committing to an hour at the gym every day. Instead, he made a rule. He had to go to the gym for at least 5 minutes every day. That's it, 5 minutes. Most days he would arrive at the gym, do a few exercises, and leave. Sometimes he would literally just walk in, change clothes, do a single bicep curl, and walk out. It felt almost ridiculous, but something remarkable happened. After a few weeks, he found himself staying longer, not because he forced himself to, but because he was already there and it felt natural to continue. This is where James discovered one of the most counterintuitive truths about habit formation. The most effective way to build a new habit is to start incredibly small. Not small, incredibly small. You're looking for the gateway habits that naturally lead to the next level. The idea is to make your habits as easy as possible to start. Anyone can meditate for 1 minute, read 1 page, or put 1 item of clothing in the hamper. And as we'll see, this strategy can do much more than most people realize. The 2-minute rule states, when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do. You'll find that nearly any habit can be scaled down into a 2-minute version. Read before bed each night becomes read 1 page. Do 30 minutes of yoga becomes take out my yoga mat. Study for class becomes open my notes. Fold the laundry becomes fold 1 pair of socks. Run 3 miles becomes tie my running shoes. The point is to master the habit of showing up. The truth is, a habit must be established before it can be improved. Instead of trying to engineer a perfect habit from the start, do the easy thing on a more consistent basis. You have to standardize before you can optimize. As you master the art of showing up, the first 2 minutes become a ritual at the beginning of a larger routine. This is not merely a hack to make habits easier, but actually the ideal way to master a difficult skill. The more you ritualize the beginning of a process, the more likely it becomes that you can slip into the state of deep focus that is required to do great things. But here's what's really happening underneath. We are motivated by the anticipation of reward, not the fulfillment of it. The greater the anticipation, the greater the dopamine spike. And it is the anticipation of a reward, not the fulfillment of it, that gets us to take action. This is why the environment matters so much. Every habit is just an obstacle to getting what you really want. Dieting is an obstacle to getting fit. Meditation is an obstacle to feeling calm. Journaling is an obstacle to thinking clearly. You don't actually want the habit itself. What you really want is the outcome the habit delivers. The central idea is to create an environment where doing the right thing is as easy as possible. Much of the battle of building better habits comes down to finding ways to reduce the friction associated with our good habits and increase the friction associated with our bad ones. When friction is low, habits are easy. When friction is high, habits are difficult. The idea behind making it easy is not to only do easy things. The idea is to make it as easy as possible in the moment to do things that pay off in the long run. Reduce the friction associated with good behaviors. When friction is low, habits are easy. Prepare your workout clothes the night before. Use smaller plates to reduce caloric intake. Unplug the television after each use. Increase the friction associated with bad behaviors. When friction is high, habits are difficult. Leave your phone in another room until lunch. Delete social media apps from your phone. Ask the waiter to box up half of your meal before it's brought to your table. Prime your environment to make future actions easier. When you organize a space for its intended purpose, you are priming it to make the next action easy. You can also invert this principle and prime your environment to make bad behaviors difficult. The difference between a good day and a bad day is often a few productive and healthy choices made at decisive moments. Each one is like a fork in the road, and these choices stack up throughout the day and can ultimately lead to very different outcomes. Energy is precious, and the brain is wired to conserve it whenever possible. It is human nature to follow the law of least effort, which states that when deciding between two similar options, people will naturally gravitate toward the option that requires the least amount of work. Out of all the possible actions we could take, the one that is realized is the one that delivers the most value for the least effort. We are motivated by the anticipation of reward, not the fulfillment of it, and by the ending, not the beginning. Addition by subtraction. When we remove the points of friction that sap our time and energy, we can achieve more with less effort. Japanese companies like Toyota became famous for their approach, which they called Kaizen. The word refers to small, continuous improvements that compound over time. And that leads us to something even more powerful than making habits easy. It leads us to understanding how to make good habits immediately rewarding and bad habits immediately painful, which is the secret to making changes that actually stick. Chapter 6: The Cardinal Rule of Behavior Chain. In the 1990s, researchers began tracking the exercise habits of 122 people over the course of several months. Half of the participants received a pamphlet with information about the benefits of exercise. The other half received the same pamphlet plus were asked to make a plan for when and where they would exercise. Surprisingly, both groups exercised roughly the same amount over the following months. But then the researchers added a third group. This group received the same pamphlet and made the same plan, but they also did one additional thing. They tracked their progress. People in the tracking group exercised significantly more than those in the other two groups. In fact, 91% of people who tracked their progress exercised at least once per week versus 35% of people in the control group. This study revealed something profound about human psychology that James calls the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided. This is where everything clicked for James about why habits stick or fail. The human brain evolved to prioritize immediate rewards over delayed rewards. Our ancestors who were able to delay gratification just a bit were able to gather more food, build better shelters, and create stronger alliances. But every benefit still had to pay off pretty quickly. With a fuller stomach, they could afford to build better fires or craft improved weapons. The benefits of their actions were always reasonably fast. As a result, the human brain evolved to favor immediate rewards. The tendency for one person to postpone immediate gratification in order to receive greater benefits at a later time is what we call delayed gratification. The ability to delay gratification is associated with academic success, physical health, psychological health, and social competence. People who can delay gratification have better relationships, make more money, and are happier overall. But here's the challenge. Most of the habits that will improve your life in the long run don't feel immediately rewarding. The costs of your good habits are in the present. The costs of your bad habits are in the future. You live in what researchers call an immediate return environment. You flip a switch and the lights turn on. You turn the faucet and water comes out. You dial a number and someone answers. You push a button and a car arrives. You hit send and your message is delivered. Living in a modern environment has changed our behavior. Hundreds of years ago, people lived in what researchers call a delayed return environment. If you wanted to eat, you needed to hunt or plant and harvest crops. If you wanted shelter, you needed to chop down trees and build a house. If you wanted to stay warm, you needed to collect firewood and start a fire. In the modern world, many of the choices you make today will not benefit you immediately. If you do a good workout today, you're still out of shape. If you eat a healthy meal today, you're still overweight. If you work hard today, you're still in debt. We live in a delayed return environment with a brain evolved for an immediate return environment. The road less traveled is the road of delayed gratification. If you're willing to wait for the rewards, you'll face less competition and often get a bigger payoff. As the saying goes, the last mile is always the least crowded. This is why it feels so hard to stick with habits like exercising, eating healthy, meditating, or reading. You are not designing for the person you are right now. You are designing for the person you will become. But here's what's really happening underneath. You need to feel immediately successful, even if it's in a small way. The feeling of progress is a form of immediate gratification. Making progress is satisfying, and visual measures provide clear evidence of your progress. This is why tracking your habits can be so powerful. Habit tracking is powerful because it leverages multiple laws of behavior change. It simultaneously makes a behavior obvious, attractive, and satisfying. When you record your last action, you immediately become more aware of the next one. The tracking itself becomes the cue for the next repetition of the habit. Tracking also helps keep your eye on the process rather than the results. Each small win feeds your desire. Evidence accumulates in your favor. You begin to believe you can actually do this. When you see the person you want to become acting in alignment with your identity, you feel successful immediately. But tracking isn't the only way to make habits immediately satisfying. You can also use immediate rewards. It's important to select short-term rewards that reinforce your identity rather than ones that conflict with it. If your reward for exercising is eating a bowl of ice cream, then you're casting votes for conflicting identities, and it won't work long-term. Instead, maybe your reward is a massage, which is both immediate and aligned with your long-term vision of being a healthy person. Eventually, as intrinsic rewards like better health, more energy, and stress relief become more apparent, you won't need a tracking system to motivate you. For now, though, measurement offers one way to overcome the invisibility of a particular stage and break down the barriers to entry for good habits. The most effective form of motivation is progress. When we get a signal that we are moving forward, we become more motivated to continue down that path. In this way, habit tracking can have an addictive quality. Habit tracking also helps keep your eye on the process rather than the results. You are not focused on getting in shape. You are focused on becoming the type of person who doesn't miss workouts. You're taking the long view. The process is more important than any individual outcome. And that leads us to something even more crucial than immediate rewards. It leads us to understanding how to get back on track when you inevitably fail, and why missing twice is the real killer of good habits. Chapter 7: The Art of Never Missing Twice. Here's a story that reveals one of the most important truths about lasting behavior change. In 2003, a research team in the UK began studying the habits of 96 people over the course of 12 weeks. Each person chose one new habit for the 12 weeks and reported each day on whether or not they did the behavior. Some people chose simple habits like drinking a bottle of water with lunch. Others focused on more demanding habits like running for 15 minutes before dinner. At the end of the 12 weeks, the researchers analyzed the data to determine how long it took each person to form their new habit. The results were all over the map. On average, it took more than 2 months before a new behavior became automatic, 66 days to be exact. But depending on the person and the circumstance, forming a single habit could take anywhere from 18 days to 254 days. But here's what was most revealing about this study. Missing one opportunity to perform the behavior did not materially affect the habit formation process. It didn't matter if someone missed a day here or there. What mattered was getting back on track quickly. This is where James discovered something that completely changed his approach to habit formation. The difference between top performers and everyone else is that top performers get back on track quickly. Research has shown that people who successfully stick with habits over the long term are not the people who never fail. They are the people who get back on track the fastest. Top performers still have areas where they struggle. The difference is that they get back on track quickly. The breaking of a habit doesn't matter if the reclaiming of it is fast. I think this principle is so important that I'll stick it to you straight. Never miss twice. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. This is a distinguishing feature between winners and losers. Anyone can have a bad performance, a bad workout, a bad day at work. But when successful people fail, they rebound quickly. The breaking of a habit doesn't matter if the reclaiming of it is fast. Too often, we fall into an all-or-nothing cycle with our habits. The problem is not slipping up. The problem is thinking that if you can't do something perfectly, then you shouldn't do it at all. You don't realize how valuable it is to just show up on your bad or busy days. Lost days hurt you more than successful days help you. If you start with $100, then a 50% gain will take you to $150. But you only need a 33% loss to take you back to $100. In other words, avoiding a 33% loss is just as valuable as achieving a 50% gain. As Charlie Munger says, the first rule of compounding: never interrupt it unnecessarily. This is why the bad workouts are often the most important ones. Sluggish days and bad workouts maintain the compound gains you accrued from previous good days. Simply doing something, 10 squats, 5 sprints, a push-up, anything really, is huge. Don't put up a zero. Don't let losses eat into your compounding. It's easy to train when you feel good, but it's crucial to show up when you don't feel like it, even if you do less than you hope. Going to the gym for 5 minutes may not improve your performance, but it reaffirms your identity. Furthermore, it keeps your habit on schedule. It counteracts the natural tendency to return to your old ways. As the saying goes, habit is the intersection of knowledge, what to do, skill, how to do it, and desire, want to do it. But here's what's really happening underneath. The all-or-nothing cycle is just one pitfall that can derail your habits. Another potential pitfall is measuring the wrong thing. Say you're running a business, and you make it a habit to call 3 potential clients every day. You track your calls daily, and you feel good when you hit your target. But tracking calls made is not nearly as good as tracking contracts signed or revenue generated. The dark side of tracking a particular behavior is that we become driven by the number rather than the purpose behind it. If your success is measured by quarterly earnings, you will optimize for quarterly earnings. If your success is measured by a lower number on the scale, you will optimize for a lower number on the scale, even if that means embracing crash diets, juice cleanses, and fat loss pills. Measurement is only useful when it guides you and adds context to a larger picture, not when it consumes you. Each number is simply one piece of feedback in the overall system. Furthermore, there are many ways to measure progress, and sometimes it helps to shift your measurement to stay motivated. If you're not feeling motivated by your current measure, perhaps it's time to change your metric. You can focus on process rather than outcomes. The human mind wants to win, whatever game is being played. This pitfall is evident in many areas of life. We focus on working long hours instead of getting meaningful work done. We care more about getting 10,000 steps than we do about being healthy. We teach for the test rather than teaching to learn. In short, we optimize for what we measure. When we choose the wrong measurement, we get the wrong behavior. This is sometimes referred to as Goodhart's Law. Named after economist Charles Goodhart, the principle states, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Measurement is only useful when it guides you and adds context to a larger picture, not when it consumes you. Each number is simply one piece of feedback in the overall system. In our data-driven world, we tend to overvalue numbers and undervalue anything ephemeral, soft, and difficult to quantify. We mistakenly think the factors we can measure are the only factors that exist. But just because you can measure something doesn't mean it's the most important thing. And that leads us to something even more fundamental than measurement and recovery. It leads us to understanding how to use the compound power of habits to continuously evolve and become the person you want to be, rather than getting trapped by the person you once were. Chapter 8, The Compound Evolution of Identity. There's a final story that James tells that brings everything together. In 1911, 2 teams of explorers set off on one of the most challenging quests in history, to be the first to reach the South Pole. The British team, led by Robert Falcon Scott, and the Norwegian team, led by Roald Amundsen, both had the same goal, but their approaches couldn't have been more different. Scott's team focused on heroic effort. They would push hard when the weather was good and rest when conditions turned bad. Amundsen's team focused on consistent progress. Regardless of weather conditions, they committed to traveling exactly 15 miles every day. When conditions were good, Amundsen's team often felt like they were holding themselves back. They could have traveled much farther. When conditions were bad, Scott's team found themselves at a major disadvantage. They had to cover more ground to make up for lost time. The results spoke for themselves. Amundsen's team arrived at the South Pole 34 days ahead of Scott's team. Even more tragically, Scott's team ran out of food and died from starvation and exposure during the return journey. This story perfectly captures the power of atomic habits. Amundsen's team understood something profound. Small, consistent actions compound over time to produce remarkable results. They didn't focus on doing something extraordinary once. They focused on doing something ordinary every single day. This is where James discovered the ultimate truth about habit formation and identity change. Your habits are not just actions you perform, they are votes for the type of person you want to become. Every habit is an opportunity to vote for your desired identity. The process of behavior change always starts with awareness. You need to be aware of your habits before you can change them. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This process of awareness and habit formation creates what James calls the compound evolution of identity. Just as money compounds through interest, habits compound through repetition. Each time you perform a habit, you are casting a vote for the type of person you want to become. And as these votes accumulate, your sense of self begins to change. The most proven way to change who you are is to change what you do. Each time you write a page, you are a writer. Each time you practice the violin, you are a musician. Each time you start a workout, you are an athlete. Each time you encourage your employees, you are a leader. Each habit not only gets results, but also teaches you something far more important: to trust yourself. You start to believe you can actually accomplish these things. When the votes mount up and the evidence changes, the story you tell yourself begins to change as well. This is the real power of atomic habits. They don't just change what you achieve, they change who you believe yourself to be. And once your identity begins to change, your habits become easier to maintain because they are now aligned with who you are, not just what you want. Of course, it works the opposite way too. Every time you choose to perform a bad habit, it's a vote for that identity. The good news is that you don't need to be perfect. In any election, there are going to be votes for both sides. You don't need a unanimous vote to win an election, you just need a majority. This is why small changes make such a big difference. It's not about being perfect, it's about being better. Each small improvement is like a pebble thrown into a pond. The effects ripple outward, influencing other areas of your life in ways you never expected. When you improve one area of your life, other areas tend to improve as well. Focus on getting 1% better in one area and watch how it starts to influence every other area of your life. This is the compound evolution of identity. But here's what's really happening underneath all of this. Success is not about reaching a destination, it's about falling in love with the process. Goals are good for setting a direction, but systems are best for making progress. A handful of problems arise when you spend too much time thinking about your goals and not enough time designing your systems. The purpose of setting goals is to win the game. The purpose of building systems is to continue playing the game. True long-term thinking is goal-less thinking. It's not about any single accomplishment. It is about the cycle of endless refinement and continuous improvement. Ultimately, it is your commitment to the process that will determine your progress. The secret to getting results that last is to never stop making improvements. It's remarkable what you can build if you just don't stop. Small habits don't add up. They compound. That's the power of atomic habits: tiny changes, remarkable results. Remember that young baseball player lying in a hospital bed, his face shattered, his dreams seemingly over. That moment of devastation became the foundation for one of the most powerful systems of personal transformation ever developed. James Clear didn't just recover from his accident. He discovered something that millions of people have now used to transform their lives: the compound power of getting just 1% better each day. You now understand that breakthrough moments are often the result of many previous actions building up the potential required to unleash major change. You know that your habits shape your identity, and your identity shapes your habits. You've learned that every habit follows the same four-step loop: cue, craving, response, reward. And you can now apply the 4 laws of behavior change. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. You understand that environment is the invisible hand that shapes behavior, that the 2-minute rule can help you build any habit, and that what is immediately rewarded is repeated. You know the most important rule for getting back on track: never miss twice. And you've discovered that every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. But knowing isn't enough. The real magic happens when you stop trying to achieve different results and start trying to become a different person. When you stop focusing on what you want to accomplish and start focusing on who you want to become. This is your moment. Right now, you have the power to cast a vote for your future self. You can choose to take one small action that aligns with the person you want to become. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be a step in the right direction. Maybe it's doing one push-up, reading one page, writing one sentence, or putting one item back where it belongs. Maybe it's choosing the apple instead of the cookie, taking the stairs instead of the elevator, or saying, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker," instead of "I'm trying to quit." Whatever it is, remember this: you don't have to be the victim of your environment. You can be the architect of it. You don't have to wait for motivation. You can create systems that make good habits inevitable and bad habits impossible. The most powerful changes don't come from dramatic moments of inspiration. They come from small habits that build momentum over time. They come from understanding that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Your current habits are perfectly designed to deliver your current results. If you want different results, you need different habits. If you want to be a different person, you need to prove it to yourself with small wins every single day. The compound interest of self-improvement is real. Time magnifies the margin between success and failure. It will multiply whatever you feed it. Good habits make time your ally, bad habits make time your enemy. This is the power of atomic habits. This is how small changes can make a remarkable difference. This is how you become the person you've always wanted to be. The question isn't whether you'll change. You're changing every moment through your actions. The question is whether you're changing in the direction you want to go. Your transformation starts with your next decision. Make it count.